didn't see a soldier. They saw a mistake. Shaky hands, quiet voice, and eyes too soft for war. The Delta Force squad barely looked up when she stepped in. One whispered, "She here to clean the rifles?" Another laughed. "She can't even hold one." Then the colonel dropped a dismantled sniper kit in front of her and barked, "2 minutes. Impress me." She didn't speak. She didn't blink. She just moved. 42 seconds later, with the rifle rebuilt and a 2,000-meter candle snuffed out in a single shot, no one dared breathe. What they thought was fear was control. Where are you tuning in from today? If this story sparked something inside you, maybe a reminder of quiet, bravery, or inner strength, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We've got more powerful hidden stories on the way, and you'll want to be here for every one of them. The fortified training bay hummed with quiet intensity. Inside, clusters of Delta Force operatives, seasoned, sharp-eyed, every movement economical, hovered over rows of spotless steel benches. Each table held precision-laid components, cutting-edge rifles, calibration tools, and modular tech. There was no chatter, just the muted rhythm of discipline. These weren't just soldiers. These were the elite, the unseen core of special operations. Spoken of in whispers and acronyms, Master Sergeant Dane Rykar stood near the far end, arms crossed, gaze calculating. His presence alone quieted the room. That morning's drill had been brutal, timed. Breakdowns and reassembly of the XM7 adaptive platform, a next-generation rifle system hailed as the future of close-quarters combat. It was sleek, data-integrated, and ruthlessly complex. No room for error. Then the heavy security door slid open with a hiss. Major Jet Halverson stepped in, posture rigid, expression unreadable. But it wasn't his entrance that turned heads. It was who followed behind him. She was slight, almost fragile in frame, wearing nondescript slacks and a loose button-up shirt. Hair tightly pinned, face drawn, eyes cast low. She didn't return any stares. Didn't speak. But Rykar noticed something others missed or pretended not to, her hands faintly trembling. A ripple passed through the operators. Boots shifted. A few exchanged brief glances. No one spoke, but judgment crackled through the silence. "Everyone," Major Halverson stated crisply, "meet your new weapons specialist." Rykar didn't uncross his arms. One brow lifted. "This is the specialist?" he asked, tone dry and unconvinced. Appointed directly by upper command, Halverson replied with finality, his voice edged with warning. Her name tag read, Kaya Stroud. Still silent, she followed Halverson to a workbench. Laid before her was a fully deconstructed XM7, each piece gleaming under the lights like puzzle, fragments awaiting mastery. Off to the side, Blake Maddox, youngest of the group and unafraid to speak where others held back, took a slow sip from his coffee, then dragged the mug further from the table's edge with an exaggerated sweep. Wouldn't want it to tip over from the shakes, he said just loud enough for others to hear. A few muffled chuckles. No laughter from her. No reaction. Maybe just the smallest shift around her eyes. Rykar studied her carefully now, gaze unreadable. "What happened to Ramirez?" he asked Halverson without breaking eye contact with Kaya. "Reassigned," came the clipped reply. Headquarters accelerated XM7 integration after the Qatar event. "Command wants the transition done yesterday." The room stilled. The name, Qatar, landed like a stone. 3 dead. The op had gone south fast. Their weapons jammed. No diagnostics, no recovery. One final burst of static on the radio. Then nothing. The grins disappeared. Coffee mugs were set down. Even Maddox went quiet. Rykar looked again at those hands. The skepticism still lingered, but something else began creeping in. Unease, not ridicule. Not dismissal, a seed of doubt. But doubt, like silence, doesn't last long in a place like this, and soon it would have no place left to hide. This is who they sent? A woman who looked like she might struggle to lift a rucksack, let alone handle one of the military's most advanced weapon systems. Her hands were visibly trembling, not from nerves, it seemed, but from something deeper, colder, older. Major Jet Halverson stepped forward and cleared his throat. "All new personnel must complete the assembly qualification before integrating with Delta, standard operating procedure." Master Sergeant Dane Rykar seized the moment. He approached slowly, deliberately, stopping just short of Kaya Stroud, close enough for his words to carry weight and challenge. "You're aware the fastest time on record is 137 seconds, right?" he said with a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. "But don't worry, we'll spot you a generous 5. Soft snickers echoed behind him. Operators turned with amused anticipation. Kaya said nothing. Didn't flinch. Didn't meet his eyes. Instead, her gaze settled on the disassembled XM7 rifle, laid out on the table, part by part, laid bare like a test only she knew the answers to. Her eyes narrowed, her breathing slowed, and oddly, her hands seemed to shake even more. "Is this really necessary?" came a voice from the back. It was Staff Sergeant Cole Straywin, quieter than most, but his tone held concern. He didn't look amused like Blake Maddox. He looked uneasy. "It's protocol," Rykar answered without looking away from her. "Everyone earns their slot. Especially now, especially after Qatar." No one had to say more. The memory still hung heavy. 3 men, gone, because something failed. And now in their place stood a civilian with shaking hands and no stripes on her sleeves. Major Halverson hesitated. He looked at Kaya, then down at the table, then back at the others.
His jaw tightened, but he said nothing more.
Instead, he tapped a timer and set it down. "Begin when you're ready." Kaya calmly removed her watch and placed it beside the timer. It was scratched, worn from age, and bore a faded insignia almost lost to time. Straywin noticed. His brow furrowed. Something about it tugged at memory. Kaya closed her eyes. 1 breath in, 1 out. And then clarity. Her hands still trembled, but her movements didn't. She reached forward, beginning with the lower receiver. Each motion was deliberate, efficient, clean. No wasted steps. No hesitation. The jokes faded. The posture of the room shifted. Operators leaned in, curiosity replacing mockery. Even Maddox forgot his coffee, staring like he'd seen a ghost. "Who is she?" someone muttered. Straywin was already checking his tablet, fingers tapping in search of context. This wasn't beginner's luck. This was muscle memory, familiarity, authority. Rykar knew it too. He watched with a tightening jaw, recognizing something he didn't want to admit. The way her hands moved wasn't improvised. It was protocol. It was doctrine. It was the kind of perfection written by those who built the system themselves. The trigger assembly, infamous for causing the Qatar failure, snapped into place with certainty. Click, then the barrel. Click, charging handle, bolt carrier, receiver. Each piece locked in like they were waiting for her. She adjusted the optic, secured the stock, inserted the magazine with a solid practiced push, and then silence. The timer beeped. 042, 42 seconds. The room froze. No jokes, no pride, just quiet disbelief. Straywin rose from his seat, tablet trembling slightly in his hands. His voice was hushed. "Sir, that's Colonel Kaya Strayod, former division lead, SOCOM Advanced Weapons." Rykar blinked, his stance shifting. "She built the XM7? "Yes, sir." Straywin nodded slowly. "Chief engineer. Field evaluator. Decorated 3 times over. Silver stars. Purple Heart. Survived the coastal breach." That last part hung in the air like a thunderclap. The coast. An op that had gone sideways fast. Everyone lost except one. Now that one stood here. Trembling hands, steady soul. Suddenly the shakes weren't weakness. They were battle scars. Maddox stared into his cup, no longer able to meet her eyes. Kaya stood straighter now. The silence wasn't mocking anymore. It was reverent. Then for the first time she spoke. Calm, measured, clear. "There's a fault in the XM7's trigger group," she said. "That's why I'm here." She looked across the room, not with defiance, but with a heavy truth behind her eyes. 3 men died in Qatar because of a design flaw. Then she turned to Halverson, her voice unwavering. "My design flaw. I wasn't assigned this mission," Colonel Kaya Strayod said steadily. "I volunteered." The room stilled, her words landing like a quiet explosion. She hadn't been ordered in to clean up someone else's mess. She had every right to stay tucked behind a desk in Washington, buried under layers of clearance and comfort. But instead, she walked directly into a room full of skepticism, to face a failure tied to her own blueprint. She chose to bear the weight herself. Master Sergeant Dane Rykar took a step forward. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't grandstanding. It was deliberate. Then he stood tall and delivered a crisp, respectful salute. One after another, the men followed suit. They stood straighter, faces solemn, saluting not just a ranking officer, but a woman who owned her mistake. Major Jet Halverson finally cleared his throat and broke the silence. "Colonel Stroud will head the XM7 overhaul operation. Full cooperation is expected." His tone made it clear this was no longer a debate. It was an order. "Yes, sir," Rykar responded, posture unbroken. Kaya's eyes drifted across the room. These were the same operators who had mocked her tremor, questioned her place among them, shuffled their coffee cups as if her presence was a liability. But there was no bitterness in her stare, no arrogance, just calm resolve. "We have work ahead," she said plainly, without ceremony, then turned toward the weapons bench. As the men dispersed back to their stations, a new weight settled over the room, one not of resistance but of responsibility. Blake Maddox hesitated, then approached slowly. "Ma'am." His voice was lower now, lacking its earlier edge. "About what I said earlier, I'm sorry." Kaya studied him a moment, then answered with calm precision. "In 3 weeks, your team deploys with the updated XM7. I promise you this, by then, the flaw that cost lives will no longer exist." She didn't wait for gratitude. And she didn't sugarcoat her promise. That was all she needed to say. Maddox gave a small nod, humbled and changed. From across the room, Rykar observed, quiet, assessing. He'd spent decades sizing up warriors. Who cracked, who endured, who took ownership when it mattered. And he realized something now. He'd misread Kaya Stroud. Badly. As Maddox stepped aside, Rykar moved in. "Colonel, I'll show you to your station," he offered quietly. "Lead the way, Master Sergeant," she replied. They walked through the austere halls of the Delta compound side by side. No hurry, no hesitation. Rykar noticed the tremor still touched her hands. She didn't try to conceal it. It wasn't going away. But her steps were sure, her spine upright. She carried more than a weapon platform. She carried regret, duty, the memory of 3 soldiers who never came back because of her design. Still, she didn't falter. When they reached her assigned lab, Rykar spoke again. "What you did back there, the men saw it. But more than that, they saw you." Kaya set her bag down, surveying the space with the eye of an engineer. She nodded once. "I didn't come here to win their respect," she said firmly. "I came to ensure this never happens again." Rykar gave a small, approving nod. "Well, Colonel, welcome to Delta. We're lucky to have you." And for the first time since her arrival, Kaya Stroud allowed the faintest smile. "You might take that back," she said. "Once I tear down and rebuild every XM7 in this building." Rykar chuckled. And to his own surprise, the words came sincerely. "I'm counting on it." She nodded, already sipping the coffee. "What time?" 0900. "I'll walk you over." She gave a short nod, then returned to her scope. Rykar lingered. There was something in the way she worked, not just technical focus, but personal investment. It wasn't about protocol. It was about accountability. Finally, he asked, voice low, "You think you've found it yet?" "The fault?" Her eyes stayed on the trigger unit. "I have strong suspicions," she said. "There's micro-wear on the sear interface. Under extreme temperature spikes, desert heat. Like in Qatar, the tolerances shift just enough to create failure. It's almost invisible." She paused, then looked up and locked eyes with him. But it was enough. And in that simple statement, there was no ego, only ownership. "This is what killed them in Qatar." 3 scenarios, Colonel Kaya Stroud said, her voice low and measured. 1, the weapons malfunctioned exactly as reported. 2, human error, unlikely given the operators involved. 3, deliberate interference. Master Sergeant Dane Rykar stiffened. "You're saying sabotage?" "XM7 procurement is a $4 billion contract," she replied evenly. "At that level, sabotage isn't paranoia, it's possibility." Before he could respond, Specialist Blake Maddox appeared in the doorway, shifting uneasily. "Sorry to interrupt, ma'am, sir. Major Halverson needs Colonel Stroud in command. Says it's urgent." Kaya nodded once. "Did he give specifics?" "No, ma'am. Just said you'd understand when you saw it." The command center carried a quiet tension when they arrived. Major Jet Halverson stood beside a main screen, which displayed satellite footage of a remote facility, grainy, time-stamped and recent. "Colonel," he said, gesturing to a terminal, "this just came through a NATO secure channel. You'll want to see it for yourself." She stepped forward. A file was already open. Schematics, shipping records, timestamps. The trigger assemblies from the XM7 rifles used in the Qatar incident came from a production facility in Eastern Europe. Halvorsen explained. "That same facility reported a break-in 3 months ago." Kaya scanned the file. "Corporate espionage?" "That was the official story," Halvorsen said grimly. "But today, one of their lead engineers was found dead in Vienna. Before he died, he sent encrypted intel suggesting the breach was internal." Her eyes narrowed. "If that was true, This wasn't just a design oversight, it was calculated. Malicious. I want full access to the Qatar reports, everything, she said. Post-incident analysis, hardware audits, chain of custody files. If it passed through hands, I want names. Halverson nodded. Already granted. Staff Sergeant Cole Straywin will assist. He leads our systems trace team. Straywin stepped forward, tablet in hand. There's a secure analysis room next door. We can start immediately. Hours passed in silence. The only light came from glowing monitors and the reflection of code dancing across the walls. They worked methodically, page after encrypted page. Right here, Kaya said, pointing at the screen. All faulty rifles came from the same batch, but were cleared by different inspection teams. Straywin frowned. That's a red flag. Quality control assigns one static team per lot to prevent misreads. Exactly, she replied. Another file popped onto the screen. And the digital certificates? All signed with the same encryption key but pushed through different locations. Look at the IP logs. Straywin's eyes widened. That's credential cloning. Someone spoofed access from multiple terminals and signed off across multiple stations. Kaya leaned back slightly. So the question becomes who had those credentials? And why sabotage that batch? The door opened and Rykar stepped in, Maddox following. Their gear was still dusty from the field. How'd the weapons run? Kaya asked without looking up. Standard performance across the board, Rykar said. Except 2 units from yesterday's intake, both misfired. Minor but concerning. Kaya's head snapped toward him. Yesterday's shipment? That batch wasn't cleared for use yet. They weren't supposed to be, Rykar confirmed. But the quartermaster claimed SOCOM gave early release authorization. I never signed off on that, she said, rising. Get those rifles secured immediately. Lock them down. Maddox glanced around, tension rising. Ma'am, what exactly are we dealing with? Straywin turned his screen toward the group. Metadata, time logs, approval chains, all laid bare. Someone's introducing flawed parts into the XM7 pipeline. Not a mistake. Not a bug. Deliberate sabotage. Kaya's expression hardened. And this time your unit was the test case. They didn't wait. Within minutes, they were at the quartermaster's annex. The office was locked, but Rykar's clearance overrode the entry. The room inside was dim, screens still active, lights low. Instead of the assigned logistics officer, a civilian contractor sat at the desk, frantically deleting files. Back away from the terminal, Rykar ordered, hand moving toward his sidearm. The man froze. His hands rose slowly. I'm performing scheduled maintenance, he said, accent faintly Eastern European. On restricted inventory logs? Kaya stepped closer. And wiping data off the weapon shipment registry? The man turned and looked at her, then blanched. Colonel Strayd, you're supposed to be in D.C. That told her everything. He wasn't improvising, he'd been briefed. He knew her position, knew where she wasn't supposed to be. Detain him, Kaya ordered, and secure every rifle from that batch under lockdown now. She turned to Rykar, eyes sharp. Get me a live connection to SOCOM command. We're not dealing with a defect. We're in the middle of an infiltration. As Dane Rykar restrained the detainee, Kaya Stroud slipped into the quartermaster. Isbayan accessed the encrypted comms, terminal reserved for classified directives. She keyed in a frequency only a handful of officers still remembered. The direct line to her former CO, Jonrel Royce Ashland. The conversation lasted under 30 seconds, but when she emerged, her expression was carved from granite. The weapons release codes, she said quietly to Dane, were traced to General Ashland's clearance profile, but he never initiated them. Blake Maddox blinked, stunned. So the breach came from someone with access at the top? Someone playing ghost in the system, Kaya confirmed. But why? Blake asked, frowning. Why compromise our own defense systems? Profit, Cole Straywin answered. The XM7 contracts have enough zeros to make anyone forget ethics. Or power, Dane added, tone sharp. Failure benefits plenty of people, especially during an election year. Whatever the angle, Kaya said, voice clipped. This wasn't a first strike. The first attempt got 3 of ours killed. We stopped this 1 minute before detonation. But whoever's behind it, they're still moving. She looked directly at Cole. I need you to dissect those security codes. I want logs, timestamps, biometric access, everything. Find out who had their hands in Ashland's credentials. Then she turned to Dane and Blake. Every XM7 rifle and component, we lock them down. I want a manual inspection part by part. Not one bolt leaves this armory until we clear it. Blake raised an eyebrow. Even with deployment in 2 weeks? Kaya's eyes were pure steel. Then we work around the clock. Because I'm not putting another operator in the ground. Because some paper pusher is treating war like a chessboard. By first light, the supply wing had transformed into an impromptu operations hub. Screens lit up with access grids, encrypted trails, and live diagnostics. The prisoner was transferred to an undisclosed site for extraction. He'd been a decoy. A paid placeholder. He offered no intel. Just cold silence. Cole hadn't left the terminal all night. His update was grim. The signature wasn't remote. Someone logged in from inside our firewall. We're talking direct access from a secure node. Dane's jaw clenched. You're telling me someone here did this? Kaya shook her head. Maybe, but don't assume Delta. Could have been a logistics tech, a contracted analyst, even a visiting liaison. Anyone who can swipe a badge and not raise suspicion. Temporary staff, auxiliary contractors, even rotating analysts, anyone with access to internal clearance systems. Could have slipped through unnoticed. Even weapons designers, came a composed voice from the doorway. Heads turned as Major Jet Halverson stepped inside, his expression unreadable, carved from stone. Sir? Dane Rykar asked cautiously. Jet advanced slowly, his eyes scanning the monitor still flickering with access trails and audit logs. Colonel Nash, Forrester has been interfacing with systems above her authorization tier, pulling encrypted traffic logs, opening direct comms with SOCOM leadership without protocol. Kiastro didn't blink, because someone had to. What we've uncovered can't wait on committee approval. Halvorson's gaze narrowed. Maybe so, but let's deal in facts. Right now, the one person here with the clearance to authorize modified components and the skills to cover it up is you, Colonel. The silence that followed was total. It wasn't an accusation. It was a slow-moving blade twisting its way in. Kaya's voice was steady, but her hands curled subtly at her sides. You're suggesting I sabotaged my own weapons program? I'm not suggesting. I'm stating the data points in that direction, Halverson replied, voice ice cold. Until command finishes its audit, you're under operational suspension. Effective immediately. You'll be confined to quarters. No system access permitted. Dane took a sharp step forward, tone hardening. With respect, sir, Colonel Forrester's been trying to prevent a systemic breach. You're pointing the finger at the wrong person. That's not your call to make, Sergeant, Halverson snapped. Stand down. 2 base security officers entered without a word, tension spiking in the room like static. The order was real and final. Kaya knew better than to resist now. One misstep, and everything they'd uncovered would vanish behind red tape and suspicion. She drew in a long, even breath. Copy that, Major, I'll comply. As the guards moved in beside her, she turned slightly toward Dane. Their eyes met just once. His slight nod, measured, quiet, was all the confirmation she needed. This wasn't over. Her assigned quarters were regulation grade, spare, clean, and uncomfortably quiet. On any other day, she might have welcomed the stillness after a stretch in the armory, but now it felt like solitary. Seated at the edge of the bed, Kaya's hands trembled more than usual, the strain of holding it together bleeding through. Across the desk sat an old, battered wristwatch, face down, its casing scratched, worn thin at the edge, where her old unit's insignia, Coast, was still barely visible. She picked it up gently, tracing the damaged curve with her thumb. That op had changed everything. The injury, the fallout, the lives lost. The guilt never really healed. Neither did the promise she'd made afterward to protect future teams from making the same mistakes. That watch reminded her. Doing the right thing rarely meant doing the easy thing. A quiet knock pulled her out of memory. She answered the knock to find Staff Sergeant Kaya, Dane Riker, and Blake Maddox waiting in the hall. Kaya clutched a tablet to her chest, eyes scanning behind her as if expecting shadows to move. We don't have much time, Dane murmured. Halverson's initiated a comprehensive security sweep. He's called in an outside task force. Kaya stepped forward, shut the door gently behind her, and added, This isn't just a security upgrade. He's prepping to dump the whole mess on you. There was a weight in Kaya's tone, but Stroud remained unmoved. She gave a single nod. Show me what you found. Kaya placed the tablet on the table, navigating quickly through locked directories. I dug into the audit trail. Someone accessed the system using a set of credentials that should have been decommissioned after the Shoreline incident. Her eyes narrowed. Those keys were scrubbed after the operation, or so we thought. They were, Stroud replied evenly. But someone brought them back online 3 months ago. From inside these walls. Blake leaned in, arms folded. Sure, but once those credentials were live again, anyone could have jumped on them. Here's the catch, Kaya pointed to the screen. Reactivation triggered a biometric prompt. It had to be validated by someone cleared for that level. Only 5 personnel on base have that clearance, and 3 are currently stationed overseas. Dane's jaw tightened. Then that narrows it to Colonel Halverson and General Royce Ashland. Stroud's eyes sharpened. She could still see Ashland's signature on the Qatari logistics document. Threads were beginning to tie together. That's not all, Kaya said, swiping again. I chased down fiscal transfers. There's a paper trail between Ashland and Meridian Defense Industries. Meridian, the same group that lost out to Crenshaw Systems on the XM7 contract, Stroud said under her breath, the implications stacking fast. They were lined up for a gold mine until Crenshaw's tech got selected. Dane added, so Ashland tanks the XM7, orchestrates a failure, makes Crenshaw's gear look unreliable. The deal falls apart. It goes back to bidding, Blake said, his voice cold. Meridian swoops back in, after the scandal clears, and 3 of our people died in that blast. Kaya said softly, anger tightly leashed in her voice. Stroud inhaled, slow and centered. It all fits. But unless we can put together evidence that holds up under a military tribunal, it's just conjecture. Straywin held the rank of lieutenant, general, and wielded more influence than most realized. That's why we came prepared, Rykar said, pulling a sleek handheld device from his coat. It was a custom diagnostic tool engineered specifically to analyze the XM7's encrypted firmware. If we can scan the inventory from last week's drop, we might uncover a signature or something that links it to the corrupted batch that slipped through in Qatar. And you plan to get access to those weapons how exactly? Kaya Stroud asked. Her tone was calm, but her eyes were sharp with doubt. I'm locked down under direct order, and you 3 waltzing in here already paints a massive bullseye on your backs. For the first time that evening, Maddox let a smirk cross his face. That's my role. The stockpile's in the primary vault, and I've got overnight shift duty. I can get us in without setting off bells. Kaya's gaze moved from one face to the next. You realize this could end your careers. Or worse. Rykar's voice dropped. We lost 3 teammates in Qatar. That could have been us. Still could be if we don't get ahead of this. She gave a single nod. Nothing more was said. The risk was clear. So was the mission. They launched the op that night. As evening deepened, the installation slid into its normal lull. Many troops were either clocked out or holed up in lounges. Maddox reported for post at the entry control of the weapons depot, while Rykar covertly accessed the facility's secondary surveillance net to build a 3-minute blind zone. The toughest part was extracting Kaya from her holding quarters without triggering internal response. At 2200 on the dot, Rykar pulled up in a nondescript utility van, carrying a folded set of base crew attire. Put this on, he said. Hallway feeds are on loop for 180 seconds. We move now. In disguise as maintenance workers, they crept through neglected sub-hallways below the dorms. Rykar kept Kaya informed through a discreet earpiece, feeding her constant updates and rerouting instructions. If foot traffic appeared ahead, the weapons vault sat deep within the compound's most restricted perimeter. As they neared the final corridor, Maddox was already stationed beside an auxiliary entrance. Path's clear, he murmured. Halverson clocked out early, got called to JCOC HQ. Guard officers out grabbing a bite. Inside, the armory was sterile and silent, an immaculate chamber of engineered death. Weapons of every category, from compact pistols to next-gen modular rifles, were stored in sealed, temp-stabilized display panels. Every item tracked, every code logged. But tonight wasn't about protocol. Tonight was about exposing what someone wanted erased, and they had only minutes to do it. The latest shipment of XM7 rifles had been stored away in a secured compartment of the armory, their crates still bearing the seals from transit. How long until we're out of time, Riker? Kaya Stroud murmured. Urgency threading. Her voice, as she and Dane Riker eased open one of the sealed containers. Supervisors scheduled back in 20. I've got a clean loop on the cameras for maybe 30, max. Cole Straven's voice replied smoothly over the comms. Kaya's fingers, steady beneath her specialized gloves, worked with practiced precision. Her tremors, once noticeable, had all but vanished. Just like that first day, she disassembled the rifle, while Riker and Blake Maddox stood as lookouts, eyes scanning for movement. Using a diagnostic kit Cole had custom rigged, Kaya ran a silent scan over every part, especially the trigger group. The rig logged everything: alloy composition, microscopic wear, and any trace of unauthorized modification. There, Kaya whispered, pointing to a single, seemingly insignificant part. That sear pin's been modified. Barely noticeable. But it's off-spec. Would it still fire? Riker asked, tension in his jaw. Yeah, at first, Kaya replied. But heat from repeated use would cause metal expansion. Then it jams or misfires, maybe worse. It'd fail catastrophically. Just like Carr's rifle? Riker pressed her. Exactly the same, she answered, eyes hard. And this wasn't some factory defect or error. It was altered on purpose. Blake's brow furrowed. Is there a trail? Can we ID who did this? Better than that, Kaya said, holding up the scanner. I can prove these flaws aren't part of my original schematics. Someone tampered with them post-production. This is deliberate sabotage. Movement! East Corridor. Cole cut in over the comms. 2 people closing in. We're out of time, Dane said, reassembling the weapon in seconds and helping Kaya shut the crate. They were just feet from the service exit when the main armory doors swung wide. Jet Halverson walked in, trailed by a second unfamiliar man. As you can see, General, Jet said with smooth confidence, the weapons are locked down pending the investigation. The tall officer behind him scanned the space with quiet authority. Kaya needed only a second to recognize him. General Royce Ashland. He gave Halverson a curt nod. Efficient work, Major. We need to contain this before it explodes into something unmanageable. Kaya Stroud, Dane Riker, and Blake Maddox crouched low behind the bulk of a dormant generator. One wrong move, one glance in their direction, and the mission would collapse, taking their only chance at revealing the task force infiltration with it. What's the situation with Colonel Forrester? Asked Cole Straven, his voice low but sharp in the cavernous storage bay. She's confined to her quarters, Jet Halverson said, expression unreadable. But knowing her, she won't sit still. There's a chance she's already looped in allies within the task force. Straven's expression hardened. Then we accelerate. I want her transferred to Fort Mee's secure installation before sunrise. Our intel specialist can handle the questioning from there. Halverson hesitated. Sir, are we sure that's necessary? Colonel Forrester's service record is impeccable. Straven cut him off with ice in his voice. Impeccable, yes. But problematic. She was the sole survivor of Operation Coast. That fact never sat right with me. Kaya's jaw tightened. So that was it. Straven had never trusted her, not since Coast. Now he was seizing this breach to validate his long-held suspicions. We move now, Dane said under his breath. Before their focus shifts, with practiced precision, the 3 slipped through a side hatch and into the auxiliary maintenance corridor. Straven and Halverson disappeared into the shadows behind them, unaware of what had just slipped away. Once inside the narrow service tunnel, Kaya activated her comm. Blake, did you get all of it? Word for word, came Blake's voice. I've already mirrored the system logs. The pattern of sabotage is identical to previous infiltrations. Then we need to deliver this to General Ashland, fast. Before Straven has her locked away permanently, Kaya said urgently. The comm center is off limits, Dane reminded her. Too many surveillance eyes. They'll track any outgoing traffic. Kaya nodded grimly. Then we disappear. I've got a hard line stashed in my field pack, isolated and untraceable. It links straight to Ashland's encrypted channel. In my quarters, Kaya Stroud said calmly, despite the weight of what was coming. There's a comm node hidden beneath the false base of my deployment case. It links directly to General Ashland's private uplink. They got her back to her quarters under the radar, but time was slipping away. By dawn, Cole Straven would initiate her transfer, and once that happened, the truth could disappear with her. As Kaya worked to establish the encrypted channel, Dane Riker, Jet Halverson, and Blake Maddox kept their voices low, exchanging contingency plans. If this link fails, Dane whispered, we'll need a plan B, something that forces an external inquiry. The gear itself is our leverage, Blake said. If we get samples out for third-party analysis... Too risky, Jet cut in. Pulling equipment off base would set off automated trace protocols. We won't have to, Kaya said, rejoining them. Ashland's deploying a verified response unit. Wheels down by 600. Think they'll beat Straven to it? Dane asked, his eyes dark with concern. They don't have a choice, Kaya said quietly. Her voice didn't waver, but the strain was written in every line of her face. They rotated shifts at the door, listening for approaching boots or unexpected movement. The hours dragged. By 5:30, the quiet had become unbearable. Every click of metal or change in airflow felt like a threat. Then, right at 06 UR, the base alert chimed. Not an alarm, something else. The tone reserved for executive arrivals. A second later, the door opened, not to escort Kaya away, but to admit General John Royce Ashland himself, flanked by 2 uniformed MPs. "Colonel Forrester," he said formally. "I've been told you've obtained proof concerning the XM7 irregularities." Kaya stepped forward, handing him a secure drive. "Yes, sir. Logs, audio diagnostics, all point to General Straywin's direct involvement." Ashland reviewed the device, his face hardening. "Good work. My team is recovering the compromised equipment now. Straywin is being detained for questioning." Dane, Blake, and Jet straightened. Ashland looked each of them in the eye. "Your loyalty to integrity and to your unit will be recognized. No punitive action will be taken for your part in this." "Appreciate that, sir," Dane replied. "We were just standing by Colonel Forrester." Ashland turned back to Kaya. "Now, about your next post. The XM7 program needs new leadership. Someone with both engineering insight and first-hand field understanding." Kaya paused, her hands clasped behind her. "With respect, General, I'd prefer to stay here until every unit's been corrected. These soldiers deserve gear they can trust." Ashland gave a slow nod. "Then complete the work. After that, report to Washington. We'll be waiting." Once he was gone, Kaya looked at her team. "Thank you," she said simply. "You would have figured it out," Dane said with a quiet grin. "We were just lucky to help." 3 weeks later, Kaya stood in the reconfigured engineering hangar that now served as her operations lab. The walls were still papered with schematics, but now, each diagram bore solutions, each flaw addressed, each weapon retested. Dane walked in, carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee. He set one beside her. "Test group just checked in," he said. "0 faults across the board." Kaya allowed herself a small smile. "Are they still trying to ship me off to Aberdeen?" Offered again. "More labs, fewer field hours." He gestured around at the stripped-down work zone. She shook her head. "I need to be here. I need to see them hold these rifles." "No, they trust them?" Dane didn't argue. "I'll let them know you're staying." As he turned to leave, Kaya spoke again. "Sergeant Raykar. The Coast Unit. Did you know the ones we lost?" "All of them," he said quietly. Kaya nodded. "So did I." A few evenings later, Kaya walked the compound alone. The sky burned in late-day amber. Operators nodded as she passed, subtle gestures of respect. Her hands still trembled sometimes, but each step was measured, resolute. Near the far wall, a squad checked their gear, XM7s fully reconfigured, calibrated to spec. Blake caught her gaze across the yard, gave a quiet salute. Kaya approached the memorial. She touched the engraved names with steady fingers. On her wrist, a battered watch caught the fading sun, the scratched. Insignia, a quiet badge of loyalty, of cost and of strength carved by survival. Some wounds don't disappear, but sometimes they become the reason you rise.